So welcome friends to another episode of DEKB7QHC. Today we're going to be covering topics of what you find on your bench. You might have seen my earlier video presentation of what you would find on my bench, and that would include the oscope right back here. And speaking of oscopes, we're going to jump right into them. So before we jump right into them, this comes as I observed on another YouTube channel, ham radio. Someone was there's lots of good oscopes out on the market right now that easily qualify for those that I've shown to you before. And in one of those was a $70 oscope from Amazon, of course, that someone responded to in the comments below the video that they thought it was a great deal, but they didn't know how to handle the synchronization. So we're gonna discuss that right here, and we're gonna open up to one of my bench scopes in the past. This is the Heathkit 010, I believe. Let me move around here. Yes. And in this scope, we have a display right here. It's showing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cycles of a sine wave. We can look at that close up right here. And within these 6 cycles, this being a rather old model from the 1960s and cheap, come on now, Heathkit was a kit, and it was cheap by virtue of not having to sell you a completed oscope. You did that yourself. You put the parts together, you soldered them in, put the tubes in, plugged it in, and you got this. Well, why am I stuck on this display? Well, right here we can see the first sine wave being represented, and right here we can see a little smear across the scope that connects this point to this point, quite literally. And this right here is called retrace. And in good scopes you have what's called, and televisions, you have what's called a retrace blanker. This one is a little shaky, but at this price range you're going to find that kind of artifact. Now this is an artifact that you'll only find in CRT displays, not not solid state displays, unless somebody's doing something wrong. So we'll back out of, okay. And notice that the sine wave starts just a few degrees before it hits the peak right here. This is the synchronization spot, and this is what you're interested in. If you wanted to start it, okay, we're going to use this curve right here. Our synchronization is right at this place. That's where the sweep starts. It goes up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, retraced, comes back to this point, starts all over again, and paints over the previous cycle display. And if you have a constant sine wave, it is all going to build into a very bright display without any smearing, and such as you see here. This is a pretty good display for this technology. So if I wanted to trigger it at a lower voltage, well, let's scan out here. We come over to this place right here, synchronizing, and you'll see that it's on the plus side. There is some this is an amplitude adjustment on this side of the plus. This is an amplitude adjustment on this side. this would be a 0. This is where you would trigger on the 0 crossing. Well, what's a 0 crossing? This is a 0 crossing. This is a 0 crossing. Similarly, and again, all of these are the 0 crossing if we have a balanced sine wave around plus and minus. That's not strictly obvious here, but we can presume that it is. So, if you were to adjust that to the mid portion of the potentiometer's range, this would we would start our trace lower here on this curve. It's going to be similar to this curve right here. So where it's triggering right now is where the setting is right there. If we move it towards the 0 setting, it will start down there. If we moved it into the negative territory, it would start triggering right here. Except this point would be over here, and we would be starting up and over, instead of up here, somewhere down here. And that would be by virtue of the synchronization moving from this over to here. So that in a nutshell is synchronizing on a primitive oscope. And even if you buy a $70 oscope, you'll certainly have this adjustment available to you. You might have others, and that's where we're going to move on to a 475. Well, no, I'm going to start in an older technology. My 545 sitting behind me. Left and right here is difficult to judge when I'm looking at the screen. However, I can see my scope here, and when we look, this is going to be tremendously different. We have 2 time bases to start with. Each of them has a triggering level, a stability setting. We can trigger on a negative, the 0 crossing, or positive levels. Here, we can select the trigger slope. Do I want to trigger on something that's decreasing in amplitude at a positive level, at a negative level? These 2 controls here give us 4-axis or 4-quadrant control. So we have not only the level, plus or minus, but we have the slope of plus or minus. And this has various different slope trigger inputs, because right here is one external trigger input. Otherwise, all your triggering is coming off of the sweep generator right here. So that's why it's all bound together by these blue lines. And you select this one through this control. Now, I'm not here to teach you about the time base quite yet. We're just talking about triggering. And if we look at the time base below, it's absolutely identical. Both of these, that's the point of these advanced designs, is their rigid conformity to each other, so that you can compare 2 signals to each other at 2 different time bases, if you feel that. And with this, you can delay when they appear. This goes to synchronization plus, and basically it's a delayed synchronization, but we're not there yet. This is just simple syncing. So returning to this more advanced form, we select our trigger here. It's internal. It's coming from the time base. We've selected the mode of AC instead of AC low frequency, or DC or auto. We're selecting a negative triggering level. The stability has no, that's just, it's a fine tune, so to speak. Now, if we move on to a higher transistorized version of this oscilloscope, we have the 475, and here we're going to return over to the time base. We now have an AB. We still have our two time bases, but now they're combined into one knob control with a split knob. In other words, this controls two different time bases. We have a clear presentation of the A time base, and we have this dot here over the B time base. So we can see the difference between these two is 5 to 1. We can see that the difference between these two is 5 to 1. And this is a delay in the synchronization of the second one, which expands the scale. So this is getting very, very off topic for synchronization, but synchronization is taken care of in this upper right level. It's kind of, we can choose our source for syncing over here. It has a number of AC, low frequency rejection, high frequency rejection, and DC. We can start after a delay, we can use it normal, we can trigger off channel 1 or channel 2 or the external. But all those considered, we either want to trigger with the slope going up or the slope going down, and we're going to set the level of where on that slope, on the minus side of it or the positive side of it. I know this can be a little plus and minus twice over. Well, like I said, this is 4 quadrants. We have, well, you have plus plus, minus plus, minus minus, and minus plus, or plus minus. Yeah, the 4 quadrants yield all the combinations of a positive going signal, a negative going signal, and where on that positive, the negative portion of the positive going, the positive portion of the positive going, the positive portion of the negative going, or the negative portion of the negative going. It's that kind of situation that we have that's selectable from this switch and combination of switches. So we've sort of blurred a lot of oscope settings in this, talking about A and B channels for the vertical input, A and B channels for the horizontal, the time base, triggering on any of those several inputs. You can trigger off the time base, or you can trigger off the signal. Well, we want to trigger off the signal. And we get to select that. Or we can do a delay, but that's an advanced topic, and we'll cover that later. So much for synchronizing your signals on your oscope. I hope that's been helpful. It can be a little touchy, especially if you have a high noise, high background noise environment. And that's where we get into the low frequency and high frequency rejections that are available to you, or may be available to you on the new scopes that are out on the market. But either way, you'll at least get that first primitive synchronization somewhere on some setting. And I hope that I helped you on how to determine, well, first you have to know what the signal's going to look like so that you can anticipate this. But when we're using our sine waves, and we're mostly expecting to see sine waves in our work, I hope that yes, there we are. I hope that you found something useful for this, and I'm going to just cut it off right here and offer you 73s until next time.